Hey guys, Sam from Manfa's Makes. How are you all? I hope you are having a fabulous Sunday and that the weather has been kinder to you than it has us. We have had persistent rain now for days and days and days. Anyway, welcome back to all my returners and hi to any newbies. If you are new here, normally on a Saturday and a Sunday I read you stories from this book here, which is Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, as a lot of you like to listen to an audiobook as you craft, and because I have a UK accent, a lot of you enjoy listening to me. So there weren't any Saturday stories this week because we did a live instead, but I am back today for a few more stories. So grab your project, grab a drink, and we will get into them in just a little second. But just my usual disclaimer, I am literally just reading you the words off of the page. I do not share any of the themes, messages or ideas that this author had. Things have changed a lot since when this was written, because it was written hundreds of years ago, and it's not really relevant, but it is still interesting to read stories from all that time ago. So like I said, I am just literally reading you the stories from the page. I will be looking down as the book is on my table. There is no need to look at the screen at all because all I am doing is reading, and you'll just get a lovely view of my forehead. So you just crochet or knit or craft away listening along, and we will get on with the stories. So we are starting today on story 135, and it is The White Bride and the Black Bride. A woman was going about the countryside with her daughter and her stepdaughter when the Lord came walking towards them in the form of a poor man and asked, "Which is the way into the village?" "If you want to know," said the mother, "seek it for yourself." The daughter added, "If you are afraid you will not find it, take a guide with you." But the stepdaughter said, "Poor man, I will take you there, come with me." Then God was angry with the mother and daughter and turned his back on them and wished that they should become as black as night and as ugly as sin. To the poor stepdaughter, however, God was gracious and went with her, and when they were near the village he said a blessing over her and said, "Choose 3 things for yourself and I will grant them to you." Then the maiden said, "I should like to be as beautiful and fair as the sun," and instantly she was white and fair as day. "Then I should like to have a purse of money which would never grow empty." That the Lord gave her also, but he said, "Do not forget what is best of all." Said she, "For my 3rd wish I desire after my death to inhabit the eternal kingdom of heaven." That also was granted unto her, and then the Lord left her. When the stepmother came home with her daughter, and they saw that they were both as black as coal and ugly, but that the stepdaughter was white and beautiful, wickedness increased still more in their hearts, and they thought of nothing else but how they could injure her. The stepdaughter, however, had a brother called Regina, whom she loved much, and she told him all that had happened. A long time ago Regina said to her, "Dear sister, I will paint your portrait, that I may continually see you before mine eyes, for my love for you is so great that I should like always to look at you." Then she answered, "But I pray you, let no one see the picture." So he painted his sister and hung up the picture in his room. He, however, dwelt in the king's palace, for he was his coachman. Every day he went and stood before the picture and thanked God for the happiness of having such a dear sister. Now it happened that the king whom he served had just lost his wife, who had been so beautiful that no one could be found to compare with her, and on this account the king was in deep grief. The attendants about the court, however, remarked that the coachman stood daily before this beautiful picture, and they were jealous of him, so they informed the king. Then the latter ordered the picture to be brought to him, and when he saw that it was like his lost wife in every respect, except that it was still more beautiful, he fell mortally in love with it. He caused the coachman to be brought before him and asked whom the portrait represented. The coachman said it was his sister, so the king resolved to take no one but her as his wife, and gave him a carriage and horses and splendid garments of cloth of gold, and sent him forth to fetch his chosen bride. When Regina came on this errand, his sister was glad, but the black maiden was jealous of her good fortune, and grew angry above all measure, and said to her mother, "Of what use are all your arts to us now, when you cannot procure such a piece of luck for me?" "Be quiet," said the old woman, "I will soon give it to you." And by her arts of witchcraft she so troubled the eyes of the coachman that he was half blind, and she stopped the ears of the white maiden so that she was half deaf. Then they got into the carriage, first the bride in her noble royal apparel, then the stepmother with her daughter, and Regina sat on the box to drive. When they had been on the way for some time, the coachman cried, "Cover you well, my sister dear, that the rain may not wet you, that the wind may not load you with dust, that you may be fair and beautiful when you appear before the king." The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" "Ah," said the old woman, "he says that you ought to take off your golden dress and give it to your sister." Then she took it off and put it on the black maiden, who gave her in exchange for it a shabby grey gown. They drove onwards, and a short time afterwards the brother again cried, "Cover you well, my sister dear, that the rain may not wet you, that the wind may not load you with dust, that you may be fair and beautiful when you appear before the king." The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" "Ah," said the old woman, "he says that you ought to take off your golden hood and give it to your sister." So she took off the hood and put it on her sister, and sat with her own head uncovered, and they drove on further. After a while the brother once more cried, "Cover you well, my sister dear, that the rain may not wet you, that the wind may not load you with dust, that you may be fair and beautiful when you appear before the king." The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" "Ah," said the old woman, "he says you must look out of the carriage." They were, however, just on a bridge which crossed deep water. When the bride stood up and leaned forward out of the carriage, they both pushed her out, and she fell into the middle of the water. At the same moment that she sank, a snow-white duck arose out of the mirror-smooth water and swam down the river. The brother had observed nothing, and drove the carriage on until they reached the court. Then he took the black maiden to the king as his sister, and thought she really was so, because his eyes were dim and he saw the golden garments glittering. When the king saw the boundless ugliness of his intended bride, he was very angry, and ordered the coachman to be thrown into a pit which was full of adders and nests of snakes. The old witch, however, knew so well how to flatter the king and deceive his ears by her arts, that he kept her and her daughter until she appeared quite endurable to him, and he really married her. One evening, when the black bride was sitting on the king's knee, a white duck came swimming up the gutter to the kitchen, and said to the kitchen boy, "Boy, light a fire, that I may warm my feathers." The kitchen boy did it, and lighted a fire on the hearth. Then came the duck and sat down by it, and shook herself and smoothed her feathers with her bill. While she was sitting and enjoying herself, she asked, "What is my brother Regina doing?" The scullery boy replied, "He is imprisoned in the pit with adders and with snakes." Then she asked, "What is the black witch doing in the house?" The boy answered, "She is loved by the king and happy." "May God have mercy on him," said the duck, and swam forth by the sink. The next night she came again and put the same questions, and the third night also. Then the kitchen boy could bear it no longer, and went to the king and discovered all to him. The king, however, wanted to see it for himself, and next evening went there, and when the duck thrust her head in through the sink, he took his sword and cut through her neck, and suddenly she changed into a most beautiful maiden, exactly like the picture which her brother had made of her. The king was full of joy, and as she stood there quite wet, he caused splendid apparel to be brought and had her clothed in it. Then she told how she had been betrayed by cunning and falsehood, and at last thrown down into the water, and her first request was that her brother should be brought forth from the pit of snakes. And when the king had fulfilled this request, he went into the chamber where the old witch was, and asked, "What does she deserve who does this and that?" and related what had happened. Then she was so blinded that she was aware of nothing, and said, "She deserves to be stripped naked and put into a barrel with nails, and that a horse should be harnessed to the barrel, and the horse sent all over the world." All of which was done to her, and to her black daughter. But the king married the white and beautiful bride, and rewarded her faithful brother, and made him a rich and distinguished man. Okay, the next story is 136, and it is called Iron John. There was once a king who had a great forest near his palace, full of all kinds of wild animals. One day he sent out a hunter to shoot him a deer, but he did not come back. "Perhaps he has been in an accident," said the king, and the next day he sent out 2 more hunters who were to search for him, and they too stayed away. Then, on the 3rd day, he sent for all his hunters and said, "Scour the whole forest through, and do not give up until you have found all 3. But of these also none came home again, and of the pack of hounds which they had taken with them none were seen again. From then on no one would venture into the forest, and it lay there in deep stillness and solitude, and nothing was seen of it except sometimes an eagle or a hawk flying over it. This lasted for many years, when a strange hunter announced himself to the king as seeking employment, and offered to go into the dangerous forest. The king, however, would not give his consent, and said, "It is not safe in there. I fear it would fare with you no better than with the others, and you would never come out again." The hunter replied, "Lord, I will venture it at my own risk. I know nothing of fear." The hunter therefore went with his dog to the forest. It was not long before the dog fell in with some game on the way, and wanted to pursue it, but the dog hardly had run 2 steps when it stood before a deep pool, could go no further, and a naked arm stretched itself out of the water, seized it, and drew it under. When the hunter saw that, he went back and fetched 3 men to come with buckets and bail out the water. When they could see to the bottom, there lay a wild man, whose body was brown like rusty iron, and whose hair hung over his face down to his knees. They bound him with cords and led him away to the castle. There was great astonishment over the wild man. The king, however, had him put in an iron cage in his courtyard, and forbade the door to be opened on pain of death, and the queen herself was to take the key into her keeping, and from this time forth every one could again go into the forest with safety. The king had a son of 8 years, who was once playing in the courtyard, and while he was playing his golden ball fell into the cage. The boy ran there and said, "Give me my ball." "Not till you have opened the door for me," answered the man. "No," said the boy, "I will not do that. The king has forbidden it," and ran away. The next day he again went and asked for his ball. The wild man said, "Open my door," but the boy would not. On the 3rd day the king had ridden out hunting, and the boy went once more and said, "I cannot open the door even if I wished, for I have not got the key." Then the wild man said, "It lies under your mother's pillow. You can get it there." The boy, who wanted to have his ball back, cast all thought to the winds and brought the key. The door opened with difficulty, and the boy pinched his fingers. When it was open, the wild man stepped out, gave him the golden ball, and hurried away. The boy had become afraid. He called and cried after him, "Oh, wild man, do not go away, or I shall be beaten." The wild man turned back, took him up, set him on his shoulder, and went with hasty steps into the forest. When the king came home, he observed the empty cage, and asked the queen how that had happened. She knew nothing about it, and sought the key, but it was gone. She called the boy, but no one answered. The king sent out people to look for him in the fields, but they did not find him. Then he could easily guess what had happened, and much grief reigned in the royal court. When the wild man had once more reached the dark forest, he took the boy down from his shoulder and said to him, "You will never see your father and mother again, but I will keep you with me, for you have set me free, and I have compassion on you. If you do all I ask you, you shall fare well. Of treasure and gold have I enough, and more than anyone in the world." He made a bed of moss for the boy, on which he slept, and the next morning the man took him to a well and said, "Behold, the gold well is as bright and clear as crystal. You shall sit beside it and take care that nothing falls into it, or it will be polluted. I will come every evening to see if you have obeyed my order." The boy placed himself by the edge of the well, and often saw a golden fish or a golden snake show itself inside, and took care that nothing fell in. As he was sitting, his finger hurt him so violently that he involuntarily put it in the water. He drew it quickly out again, but saw that it was quite gilded, and whatsoever pains he took to wash the gold off again, all was to no purpose. In the evening Iron John came back, looked at the boy, and said, "What has happened to the well?" "Nothing, nothing," he answered, and held his finger behind his back, that the man might not see it. But he said, "You have dipped your finger into the water. This time it may pass, but take care you do not again let anything go in." By daybreak the boy was already sitting by the well and watching it. His finger hurt him again, and he passed it over his head, and then unhappily a hair fell down into the well. He took it quickly out, but it was already quite gilded. Iron John came and already knew what had happened. "You have let a hair fall into the well," he said. "I will allow you to watch by it once more, but if this happens for the 3rd time, then the well is polluted, and you can no longer remain with me." On the 3rd day the boy sat by the well and did not stir his finger, however much it hurt him. But the time was long to him, and he looked at the reflection of his face on the surface of the water, and as he still bent down more and more while he was doing so, and trying to look straight into the eyes, his long hair fell down from his shoulders into the water. He raised himself up quickly, but the whole of the hair of his head was already golden and shone like the sun. You may imagine how terrified the poor boy was. He took his pocket handkerchief and tied it round his head, in order that the man might not see it. When he came, he already knew everything, and said, "Take the handkerchief off." Then the golden hair streamed forth, and let the boy excuse himself as he might, it was of no use. "You have not stood the trial, and can stay here no longer. Go forth into the world, there you will learn what poverty is. But as you have not a bad heart, and as I mean well by you, there is one thing I will grant you. If you fall into any difficulty, come to the forest and cry, 'Iron John,' and then I will come and help you. My power is great, greater than you think, and I have gold and silver in abundance." Then the king's son left the forest and walked by beaten and unbeaten paths for a long time, until at last he reached a great city. There he looked for work, but could find none, and he had learned nothing by which he could help himself. At length he went to the palace, and asked if they could take him in. The people about court did not at all know what use they could make of him, but they liked him and told him to stay. The cook took him into his service, and said he might carry wood and water and rake the cinders together. Once, when it so happened that no one else was at hand, the cook ordered him to carry the food to the royal table, but as he did not like to let his golden hair be seen, he kept his little cap on. Such a thing as that had never yet come under the king's notice, and he said, "When you come to the royal table, you must take your hat off." He answered, "Oh Lord, I cannot. I have a bad sore place on my head." Then the king had the cook called before him, and scolded him, and asked how he could take such a boy as that into his service, and that he was to turn him away at once. The cook, however, had pity on him, and exchanged him for the gardener's boy. And now the boy had to plant and water the garden, hoe and dig, and bear the wind and bad weather. Once in summer, when he was working alone in the garden, the day was so warm he took his little cap off, that the air might cool him. As the sun shone on his hair, it glittered and flashed, so that the rays fell into the bedroom of the king's daughter, and up she sprang to see what that could be. Then she saw the boy, and cried to him, "Boy, bring me a wreath of flowers." He put his cap on with all haste, and gathered wild field flowers and bound them together. When he was ascending the stairs with them, the gardener met him, and said, "How can you take the king's daughter a garland of such common flowers? Go quickly and get another, and seek out the prettiest and rarest." "Oh no," replied the boy, "the wild ones have more scent and will please her better." When he got into the room, the king's daughter said, "Take your cap off, it is not seemly to keep it on in my presence." He again said, "I may not, I have a sore head." She, however, caught at his cap and pulled it off, and then his golden hair rolled down on his shoulders, and it was splendid to behold. He wanted to run out, but she held him by the arm and gave him a handful of coins. With these he departed, but he cared nothing for the gold pieces. He took them to the gardener and said, "I present them to your children, they can play with them." The following day the king's daughter again called to him that he was to bring her a wreath of field flowers, and when he went in with it she instantly snatched at his cap and wanted to take it away from him, but he held it fast with both hands. She again gave him a handful of coins, but he would not keep them, and gave them to the gardener for playthings for his children. On the third day things went just the same. She could not get his cap away from him, and he would not have her money. Not long afterwards the country was overrun by war. The king gathered together his people, and did not know whether or not he could offer any opposition to the enemy, who was superior in strength and had a mighty army. Then said the gardener's boy, "I am grown up and will go to the wars also. Only give me a horse." The others laughed and said, "Seek one for yourself when we are gone. We will leave one behind us in the stable for you." When they had gone forth, he went into the stable and got the horse out. It was lame of one foot, and limped hobblety-jig, hobblety-jig. Nevertheless he mounted it and rode away to the dark forest. When he came to the outskirts, he called Iron John 3 times so loudly that it echoed through the trees. Thereupon the wild man appeared immediately and said, "What do you desire?" "I want a strong steed, for I am going to the wars." "That you shall have, and still more than you ask for." Then the wild man went back into the forest, and it was not long before a stable boy came out of it, who led a horse that snorted with its nostrils and could hardly be restrained, and behind them followed a great troop of soldiers, entirely equipped in iron, and their swords flashed in the sun. The youth made over his 3-legged horse to the stable boy, mounted the other, and rode at the head of the soldiers. When he got near the battlefield, a great part of the king's men had already fallen, and little was wanting to make the rest give way. Then the youth galloped there with his iron soldiers, broke like a hurricane over the enemy, and beat down all who opposed him. They began to fly, but the youth pursued and never stopped until there was not a single man left. Instead, however, of returning to the king, he conducted his troop through a path back to the forest and called forth Iron John. "What do you desire?" asked the wild man. "Take back your horse and your troops, and give me my three-legged horse again." All that he had asked was done, and soon he was riding on his three-legged horse. When the king returned to his palace, his daughter went to meet him and wished him joy of his victory. "I am not the one who carried away the victory," said he, "but a stranger knight who came to my assistance with his soldiers." The daughter wanted to hear who the strange knight was, but the king did not know, and said, "He followed the enemy, and I did not see him again." She inquired of the gardener where his boy was, but he smiled and said, "He has just come home on his three-legged horse, and the others have been mocking him and crying, 'Here comes our hobblety-jig back again.'" They asked too, "Under what hedge have you been lying sleeping all the time?" He, however, said, "I did the best of all, and it would have gone badly without me." And then he was still more ridiculed. The king said to his daughter, "I will proclaim a great feast that shall last for 3 days, and you shall throw a golden apple. Perhaps the unknown will come to it." When the feast was announced, the youth went out to the forest and called Iron John. "What do you desire?" asked he. "That I may catch the king's daughter's golden apple." "It is as safe as if you had it already," said Iron John. "You shall likewise have a suit of red armour for the occasion, and ride on a spirited chestnut horse." When the day came, the youth galloped to the spot, took his place among the knights, and was recognized by no one. The king's daughter came forward and threw a golden apple to the knights, but none of them caught it but he. Only as soon as he had it, he galloped away. On the second day, Iron John equipped him as a white knight, and gave him a white horse. Again he was the only one who caught the apple, and he did not linger an instant, but galloped off with it. The king grew angry and said, "That is not allowed. He must appear before me and tell me his name." He gave the order that if the knight who caught the apple should go away again, they should pursue him, and if he would not come back willingly, they were to cut him down and stab him. On the third day he received from Iron John a suit of black armour and a black horse, and again he caught the apple. But when he was riding off with it, the king's attendants pursued him, and one of them got so near him that he wounded the youth's leg with the point of his sword. The youth nevertheless escaped from them, but his horse leapt so violently that the helmet fell from the youth's head, and they could see that he had golden hair. They rode back and announced this to the king. The following day the king's daughter asked the gardener about his boy. "He is at work in the garden. The queer creature has been at the festival too, and only came home yesterday evening. He has likewise shown my children 3 golden apples which he has won." The king had him summoned into his presence, and he came and again had his little cap on his head. But the king's daughter went up to him and took it off, and then his golden hair fell down over his shoulders, and he was so handsome that all were amazed. "Are you the knight who came every day to the festival, always in different colours, and who caught the 3 golden apples?" asked the king. "Yes," he answered, "and here the apples are." And he took them out of his pocket and returned them to the king. "If you desire further proof, you may see the wound which your people gave me when they followed me. But I am likewise the knight who helped you to your victory over your enemies. If you can perform such deeds as that, you are no gardener's boy. Tell me, who is your father?" "My father is a mighty king, and gold have I in plenty, as great as I require." "I well see," said the king, "that I owe thanks to you. Can I do anything to please you?" "Yes," answered he, "that indeed you can. Give me your daughter to marry." The maiden laughed and said, "He does not stand much on ceremony, but I have already seen by his golden hair that he was no gardener's boy," and then she went and kissed him. His father and mother came to the wedding and were in great delight, for they had given up all hope of ever seeing their dear son again. And as they were sitting at the marriage feast, the music suddenly stopped, the doors opened, and a stately king came in with a great retinue. He went up to the youth, embraced him, and said, "I am Iron John, and was by enchantment a wild man, but you have set me free. All the treasures which I possess shall be your property." So that was the second story. I'm going to read one more, and then that will be it for today. So the last story is story 137, and it is called The 3 Black Princesses. East India was besieged by an enemy who would not retire until he had received $600. Then the townsfolk caused it to be proclaimed by beat of drum that whosoever was able to procure the money should be mayor. Now there was a poor fisherman who fished on the lake with his son, and the enemy came and took the son prisoner and gave the father $600 for him. So the father went and gave them to the great men of the town, and the enemy departed, and the fisherman became mayor. Then it was proclaimed that whosoever did not say Mr. Mayor should be put to death on the gallows. The son got away again from the enemy, and came to a great forest on a high mountain. The mountain opened, and he went into a great enchanted castle, wherein chairs, tables, and benches were all hung with black. Then came 3 young princesses, who were entirely dressed in black, but had a little white on their faces. They told him he was not to be afraid, they would not hurt him, and that he could save them. He said he would gladly do that, but if he did but know how. At this they told him he must for a whole year not speak to them, and also not look at them, and what he wanted to have he was just to ask for, and if they dared give him an answer they would do so. When he had been there for a long while, he said he should like to go to his father, and they told him he might go. He was to take with him this purse with money, put on this coat, and in a week he must be back there again. Then he was caught up, and was instantly in East India. He could no longer find his father in the fisherman's hut, and asked the people where the poor fisherman could be, and they told him he must not say that, or he would come to the gallows. Then he went to his father and said, Fisherman, how have you got here? Fisherman, how have you got here? Then the father said, You must not say that. If the great men of the town knew of that, you would come to the gallows. He, however, would not stop, and was brought to the gallows. When he was there, he said, O my masters, just let me go to the old fisherman's hut. Then he put on his old smock frock, and came back to the great men, and said, Do ye not now see? Am I not the son of the poor fisherman? Did I not earn bread for my father and mother in these clothes? Hereupon his father knew him again, and begged his pardon, and took him home with him. And then he related all that had happened to him, and how he had got into a forest on a high mountain, and the mountain had opened, and he had gone into an enchanted castle, where all was black, and 3 young princesses had come to him, who were black except a little white on their faces. And they had told him not to fear, and that he could save them. Then his mother said that might very likely not be a good thing to do, and that he ought to take a holy water vessel with him, and drop some boiling water on their faces. He went back again, and he was afraid, and he dropped the water on their faces as they were sleeping, and they all turned half white. Then all the 3 princesses sprang up and said, You accursed dog, our blood shall cry for vengeance on you. Now there is no man born in the world, nor will any ever be born, who can set us free. We have still 3 brothers who are bound by 7 chains. They shall tear you to pieces. Then there was a loud shrieking all over the castle, and he sprang out of the window and broke his leg, and the castle sunk into the earth again. The mountain shut to again, and no one knew where the castle had stood. So there we are, guys. There's your stories for today. I hope you enjoyed them. I will return with stories next weekend, all being well. So what to expect on my channel this week. So Monday will be the usual segment of Magazine Monday. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be doing on Tuesday as yet, so watch this space. Wednesday there is a special video explaining to you what is going to be happening with December's Amigurumi Wars. Thursday will be Tile of the Week Thursday. Friday will be Crochet Catch Up, and then we're back to our stories again. So I hope you tune in during the week when you have time. I do appreciate the time you spend with me. I hope the rest of your Sunday is absolutely fabulous, and I shall see you very, very soon. But until then, stay safe, be kind, look after one another, get some good quality time in with your loved ones, and get some good quality crafting time in. I will see you in the next one, or around the YouTube streets. Bye guys, take care.